So you are Jake Hartnell. You are a longtime Cosmos contributor. You founded the Cosmos chain, Juno. You founded the CosmWasm Project DAODAO. But now you're working in the Ethereum eigenlayer ecosystem on this project called Layer, which you recently founded, which is a Wasm AVS. So what's wrong with Cosmos? What are the cool things about Wasm? And why the move over to the Ethereum ecosystem?
Wow, it's like 5 different questions in one. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. First of all, Layer. Layer is just kind of, we wanted to pick the most boring vanilla name possible. It's like literally just name Layer. We have no SEO. It's great. This is by design because we're going to be launching more interesting products that have more unique names. Right? It's almost like we're still in stealth. It's great. I think one of the reasons why I went back to Ethereum is, and it's not just Ethereum. I think I've already been infected by the interchain mindset, right? But I want a real interchain. I don't want just Cosmos chains talking to each other, right? That's not a real interchain. That's just like Cosmos network, right? And where's the actual fucking money? Oh wait, can we swear on this podcast?
Let's go for it.
Okay, sweet. Well, where's the goddamn liquidity, right? Like it's on Ethereum, right? Or it's also on Bitcoin, right? So we are working very closely with the eigenlayer team. But as we think about restaking, one of the things I also worked on was mesh security, right? And so I think about the future of restaking is this multi-chain restaking, right? And we're just tapping into the sources. So eigenlayer is obviously a great early partner of ours. They've been super supportive. But we're also planning on working with Babylon as well, and building our own restaking protocol called Commitments, which is mesh security V2, just way more enhanced. It's an evolution of some similar ideas, right? And the key innovation there is that you cannot just provide security, but you can also consume security from many different places. And so this actually makes really awesome mesh graphs, if you will. We can talk more about that if you want to get into it. Wow, there was so many. Your question was 5 different questions.
Let's start off with just who you are, and I guess where you started originally in Ethereum, why you moved over to Cosmos, sort of the projects that you worked in Cosmos, the lessons from Cosmos, and then why you're moving on to Layer.
Okay, well, I'd love to talk about also more interesting things than the past, but we can do that if you want. It's your show. I don't know. I don't want to tell a huge long life story. I think it's kind of boring. But it's kind of trying to build stuff in Ethereum, and then CryptoKitties hit, and it's really fucked up the use case I was trying to build, right? Because gas fees were insane. I looked at some other chains, but everyone was trying to build the world computer at that time. And this was late 2017. I went to a talk at my alma mater, UC Berkeley, and Sunny was there, and he gave a talk on the Internet of Blockchains. And he presented Cosmos, right, which was proof of stake, right? This is late 2017. All this stuff is super sci-fi technology, right? It was proof of stake, and then IBC for cross-chain communication, an internet of blockchains instead of everyone just trying to do the one world computer. And so I got really pilled on that vision, and then the market crashed, and had to go get a real job, my one only real job, because I had all my money in crypto. Fast forward, did some Cosmos stuff. I think Cosmos was great. Cosmos is one of the most innovative and interesting ecosystems. I still love Cosmos. But, I think there's some things in Cosmos that really hold the ecosystem back. One of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough is the lack of collaborative spirit or shared incentive. Everyone has their own L1, right? And so then everyone's just trying to build their own little empire, and they can't work together. For an ecosystem that's supposed to be focused on interoperability, we actually suck at things like standardization. Look at something like Token Factory, for example. Such a simple standard. Make tokens, right? So we don't have to have like ERC20 tokens or whatever. And we can't even get this to work. Like, it's an absolutely broken standard. I was really excited about Token Factory when it came out, and I'm sad to say, one of the advocates for it. And it's not worked out well. Like, for example, with DAODAO and our token DAO contracts, we have to have all this like separate logic to handle minor differences in Token Factory between the different chains, right? Something as simple as tokens cannot be standardized in this like ecosystem, right? There's a bunch of other problems too, like, some real governance issues. I think bad vibes as well. Like, there's some really like bad vibes. There's just like a lot of really unnecessary drama, right? And like the parties suck. Like the culture here, like we have a great developer culture, but the rest of the culture, it's not that interesting. Like, maybe you disagree. You look shocked. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, a lot of that stuff runs true. A lot of that stuff is in the works, changing. We'll see. But
Yeah,
then why on to?
I think honestly, there's a big opportunity to change it, especially with this like bull market, right? Like, I think we got hit especially hard because of Terra, right? The whole Cosmos ecosystem. I think we oftentimes like put blame on this or that, right? But like, I think the reality is we got hit more than any other ecosystem because of all that UST that was just like so incredibly toxic, and so we got hit harder than other ecosystems in the bear market. And then that like led to a scarcity mindset, let's say, and that scarcity mindset has not been good for any of our bags. Like, yeah. I don't know. I really don't want to talk about like Cosmos or like problems in Cosmos, right? Because what I think is more interesting is to think about like where do we want to go with crypto these days, right? What's interesting to work on, and I think there's been some like interesting things in Cosmos, and what motivates me is I want to just do like really cool, crazy things, right? I'm also obsessed with like DAOs and governance tooling, like, which is why I made DAODAO. Like, I love DAODAO. And DAODAO is on so many chains I've lost count. In terms of like no one talks about it, but in like terms of like TVL, we're probably like one of the largest, if not the largest, like protocol in Cosmos in terms of like the amount of funds that are in our smart contracts. And entire chains like Neutron use DAODAO for their governance. They don't even use the Cosmos SDK module, right? And we did all this without any support from the ICF. So,
Can you talk about how you sort of came to the conclusion of Layer and like the motivations behind founding Layer?
Yeah. So I really wanted to do some next level things with DAODAO. Like, I don't know, like DAO controlled AI agents and like new types of like, futurarchy and like cross chain accounts, because I was very, I have a lot of friends in the Ethereum world from back in the day. That's kind of more of my like social circle as well. And, I think I wanted to be able to like actually control accounts on EVM blockchains and interact with EVM stuff. I wanted to like really push the meta of like, what's possible with DAOs and things like that, right? And I found that like there wasn't like the attitude in Cosmos to like do those interesting things, and there wasn't the funding there either, right? And I think that when EigenLayer came out, it actually was like kind of a big aha moment, because it was like, when we built mesh security originally, we built it for like, kind of like an interchain security kind of thing, like shared security for chains, right? And as EigenLayer came out, we started seeing all these interesting AVSs. It made me realize that this like restaking like kind of concept, right, which is terribly named, by the way. Um, I have a different name I prefer for that, but we'll keep calling it restaking because that's what everyone's calling it right now. Um, this restaking concept can be applied to way more things than just like securing chains, right? Like, and that like this was actually, I think, for me, the birth of like a really interesting new primitive, right? Um, it also became clear that like no one in Cosmos, aside from Osmosis, thank you Osmosis, we're gonna like ship mesh eventually, but like there was clearly not support for mesh because they were trying to push like partial site security or whatever, right? And they put millions of dollars towards that, and like I don't know if we were ever like mesh is done, by the way. It's like just sitting there because it needs to be audited. Like um, that's a long story. But no, I really like I've been in crypto for a while, and I think things have just gotten a little bit boring, right? Like like when is the last time you saw like a novel DeFi protocol? Like we see all these projects, infrastructure projects launching, but it's just like another, oh, fast chain good, or like fast EVM chain, amazing. Like, or here's another EVM L2, or here's another roll up of roll up thing, or here's another like, it's just like more and more of the same. And none of it's fucking interesting to consumers at all. Like, where are the interesting goddamn apps? Like, you know, um, like we have people like Dada seems like a boring app, but like it's kind of not. It's actually one of the more subversive apps, right? Like, our goal is to like build better governance tooling to eventually replace like governments and nonprofits and corporations, right? Like the boomer way of doing things on paper is just like, it's a relic of that time, right? And we're, well, at least attempting. I'll leave it to others to say how well we're doing. We're at least attempting to try to build like a different future, right? With different governance tools that are more oriented towards our network, like powered world, right? Like networks around the world, we need tools that can actually govern networks, right? And soon AIs are going to run the world, and we need tools that can govern AIs, right? So really, the motivation behind Layer was like, I wanted to make actually cool AVS technology, right? Smart contracts are dumb. Like they really are. Like smart contracts are great. I love smart contracts. I've written a lot of smart contracts. But there's very limited things you can do with them. Back in the day, my favorite time in crypto was actually like 2015, 2016 Ethereum, because we're in the Bay Area and everyone's just like hanging out and talking about these ideas, and nothing is real. It's all hyperstition, right? It's all just like visions of the future, right? And everyone's like, starting to write white papers and talking about how we can like decentralize Uber and decentralize social media and like, make like user-owned networks and like data collectives and, like prediction markets and all these like things. And a lot of those ideas, fast forward 10 years, we still don't have those things. Now we did achieve a lot of great deal. Like, the problem with that era was like everyone had all these huge visions and like the technology was not ready yet. I actually think we're at a point where like the technology is getting ready, but I think we're missing a crucial piece. And for me, that piece was like the notion of like actively validated services or verifiable off-chain compute, right? Or verifiable off-chain services. To me, this is the missing ingredient because like, let's say you wanted to make something like decentralized Uber, right? You need to do ride matching, right? Ride matching is an expensive computational process that you probably should like run. Like you cannot run that as like a smart contract, right? There's a whole class of things, a whole class of algorithms just don't make any sense to run in like a smart contract kind of context, right? Which doesn't mean that smart contracts aren't useful. It just that means like we need to build other tools that allow us to build new types of protocols and new types of user experiences. Like, for example, like, if like we want to move towards intelligent protocols, right? These protocols that combine both on and off chain components and like compose those into like verifiable execution flows. And this is really what we work on Layer. Our first product is called Waves, or WAVS. It's a WASM AVS runtime. It's going to be launching on EigenLayer and a bunch of other chains, right? Because at the end of the day, one of the things we're not doing is building a blockchain because I'm much more of an interchain strategy, right? Like just make a protocol and deploy your protocol everywhere, right? That's actually how DAODAO became one of the largest protocols in Cosmos, even though people don't talk about it, uh, is because we deploy it everywhere, right? You know, a bunch of like midwits were like telling me like a long time ago, like launch a DAODAO chain, make the governance chain that everyone uses for governance, and I knew this was a dumb idea. Why? Because every chain wants its own governance. Why would you outsource your governance to another chain? Like, it's stupid. That's like some super core to what you do, right? No one would sign up for that. It's just like one of the things is like, you know, sometimes when you have a tool like the Cosmos SDK, like, you know, it's like that old joke when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when you have the Cosmos SDK, everything looks like a chain, right? And this is not necessarily the smartest way to think about it because like then we wind up with a bunch of app chains that no one needs or actually wants to use, right? And people need to like people building products. I oftentimes talk with people like you really need to like go out and talk with like actual like users and like actual customers, right? Like other chains are not going to want to use your governance chain for their governance. They're going to want to have governance on their chain, right? And so maybe give the people what they want. I've been rambling, but like, yeah, Waves is our first product to market. It's a WASM AVS runtime. And so it's kind of like a next level AVS framework. You can think of it as like one AVS that can run a whole bunch of different services. You can write a whole bunch of different WASM components that do things like oracles, verify ZK proofs, generate ZK proofs, uh, run AI agents, like, you know, and you can do like things that, you know, you might not have heard of WASI before. You probably heard of WebAssembly, right? I love WebAssembly. Um, but WASI stands for WebAssembly System Interface. And it allows you like lower level access to things like file storage or networking or IO or GPU workloads or random number generation or the clock, you know, all the stuff that you can't do in smart contracts, right? You'll never be able to do this stuff with Move, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I love Move, Gmove. But like, but yeah, this is stuff you can do with real programming languages, right? And the other great thing about WASI, and like, I think people are like there's a reason why these big tech companies like Amazon and Microsoft and even Docker are investing a lot of money into these technologies. And it's because it's just more efficient. They can like save like 50x like on their compute cost, right? Docker is just very, very like Docker's great. Docker's not going away, but it's very inefficient. Every Docker image has a whole Linux file system in it. That means boot up time. When you boot up a Docker image, you have to boot up the file system. It takes a couple seconds. Sometimes in certain Docker containers, it can take even longer than that, right? So like that really just limits like how well you can do resource management, right? Because if you're going to need something, you have to like spin it up and have it running like idle cycles in case it needs to handle a request. Versus like WASI, it's like, you know, millisecond startup time, right? And so you can make much more dynamic and better use of resource allocation. Another thing is like image size. Like each Docker image has like, you know, a whole Linux operating system in it. That's a lot of overhead, right? And you have that operating system usually just to run one program. So what if you could just compile that program to something that's like, I don't know, like the JVM almost, or, you know, a nice little virtual machine, and then just run that directly. So like the reason WASM and WASI are interesting and why big companies are still investing in these technologies is that like they're just more efficient. Um, and it also can translate to like much better like user experience. Like one of the things that I found with like AVSs with EigenLayer is kind of a nightmare right now. Actually, I would say this is true across all the people trying to do AVS stuff. Like it's still very early days in AVS world. I would say like, you know, roll-ups have come a long way. Like I think AVSs are where like roll-ups were in like 2020. Um, so which is exciting to me. I'd much rather be part of like, you know, bringing out something into the world that's like still has a lot of stuff to be figured out rather than, you know, doing the thing that we like absolutely know how to do. That's just me. Um, but yeah, Waves is super cool. We're also probably the only AVS framework that's thought about composability. So how you can string together a bunch of different smart contracts and components into these verifiable execution protocols to like, or these verifiable execution flows. Sorry. Um, yeah, and we're gonna do that. We're gonna use that to um, make some cool I don't know, like cybernetic life forms or something like that.
Yeah. So you're telling me that like we have all this infra fatigue and like it's mostly been the same. We sort of like forgot to like for developers instead of like touch grass, it's like talk to the users and like see what they want. We sort of like forgot the sort of cooler ideas of like I guess the white paper era of like actually disrupting like real systems and like applications.
Totally. And
And
I think
so
we,
and so
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. And so instead of like another chain or like another like infra thing, sort of WASM is not bounded to sort of like CosmWasm is great, Move is great, EVM is great, all this stuff, but it's still bounded to smart contracts, which
Mhm.
ultimately are rigid and don't like scale up to like other cool things in the world for like real applications. And so Layer is trying to make a WASM AVS framework. Is that correct? To like bring on this new application experiments, cool stuff.
Yeah, basically. And it's a multi-chain WASM AVS framework because like, look, we're like, we're an Ethereum project. Um, it's great to be back home. But I still love I was still infected with the interchain idea. I still love that idea. I think it's the future, right? Like, and I think that what I want to see, and I think that this would be my advice for Cosmos, is make a true interchain. Don't just like have a bunch of Cosmos SDK chains like talking to each other. That's not as interesting as if like Solana is in the mix, or if Ethereum is in the mix, or if Ethereum and all its L2s are in the mix, or if like Bitcoin is in the mix. Like the more chain, like the more we have a true interchain, like that's where like the liquidity can flow, right? And I think that was a problem like last cycle is like the pipes into the interchain were not very good, and we all suffered from like lack of liquidity, and then we all fought each other because there was not very much liquidity like around, right? Instead of um, yeah.
And so now let's I guess talk about more layer stuff. So it's a WASM framework and that lets you
Well,
run sort
waves
of
is a like layer is just like it's really a bullshit name. Like it's kind of just like a trolling name, or it's like a way we can kind of like remain in stealth. Um, like I kind of love the idea of having like the most boring, hard to SEO name ever, but like doing like really interesting things. But the things we as we put them out, like the new things are going to have different names that are going to be more exciting, and eventually we'll get to the really exciting thing that's like Um, but yeah, the first thing that we're releasing is called Waves or WAVS.
mhm.
Some people call it WAVs.
I guess we now talked about why WASM is cool, sort of the AVS stuff, application side. Let's get more into uh let me think. What do you want to get into first of all?
I don't know. What are your hot takes? Like I always enjoy
Or my
following
hot
your
take?
Twitter, and so sometimes I think it's fun if we like reverse the roles for a second and like
Oh,
what are
okay.
your hot takes? Like we can switch back in a bit, but welcome to my podcast, and yeah, um, I want to know your hot takes.
My hot takes is we sort of got lost in like the whole infraland stuff. So every single cycle it's like, oh shit, like turns out like this hot crypto stuff is like unscalable. Let's like invest in more infra. And we spent like 3 years investing in infra, and then we're like, okay, the infra's here, and then we're like, oh shit, there's no applications. And so it sort of happens like every single year, and we saw sort of like fall in love with sort of certain narratives, and then like right now it's like the worst because every single time we like 10x like not double down, we like invest in more infra, and then like people are left being like, what's next? Where's like the users? Like I thought we are supposed to like change shit, and now we're like arguing all day. We sort of just got lost in everything, and so like
Mm-hmm.
everyone is now starting like this existential sort of, why am I even here? Did I spend the last 10 years of my life arguing over, I remember like arguments over like Juno funding open source stuff and like the deep Cosmos bear, and that shit was like so incredibly traumatic, and I'm like that's such a waste of time. Like
Totally.
developers need to actually talk with users and like actually like I would say get away from the speculation stuff. More user oriented stuff. I feel like that's now what everyone's feeling. And right now
Yeah.
everyone's just tired of like the info debates.
Well, we kind of have a really killer team at Layer. Like I said, we have a really fucking boring name by design, but kind of have the DAODAO team. We also have Reese. We have Ethan Fry, who created CosmWasm. We've got a bunch of like killers, and we're gonna be like shipping some insane apps because at the end of the day, no one cares about infrastructure, right? Like we could build like a really boring like AVS project, like run your WASM components on our AVS thing. Wow, that sounds so exciting. No, like all like in order for people to understand why this infrastructure even matters, they need new experiences, right? One of the things like that I'm excited to launch next year, and it will be coming to Cosmos chains as well, because our whether we get the security from Eigenlayer or we get the security from Bitcoin or we get the security from a mesh of different tokens, we can make services that can run everywhere, right? And that's much more interesting than like, oh, come use my L1, right? You gotta also, I think there needs to be a lot of people that are thinking about like interchain protocols, like go where the users are, right? Don't just make a random DeFi chain, like make a DeFi protocol that like spans a bunch of different chains and like ties into liquidity from a bunch of different chains. Like go where the liquidity is, go where the users are. I don't know. I'm done ranting about that. I think I've made that point. But I'm really excited for DAO controlled AI agents. So this is, I think, going to be really sick. With DAODAO, you'll be able to effectively like write policies and have agents that like go and enforce those policies, right? I think this is actually how we're going to like really transform like governance in real world governments and like also corporations and stuff like that. So, bureaucracy is sometimes needed, but bureaucracy sucks, right? It's really inefficient. And what if instead we could just vote on a policy, right? And then we have agents that automatically go out and enforce that policy, like automatically in real time. One of the demos that we've made for this is a AI bouncer for a membership DAO. So say you've got a club, right? And then as a club, you don't want to vote every time you like have to like add a new member, right? It might be a lot of work, right? It's like a bunch of different steps. You have to like go. Someone has to go and make a proposal. Then you have to convince all the DAO members. Like voting sucks. Like, look, voting is really important. We're not removing voting from DAO, but I think the key thing that I'd love to get at is like how can we vote less? Because voting sucks. It takes a lot of time, right? And so DAO controlled AI agents are one way to do this, right? Where you can instead just vote one time on a policy, like what your membership policy should be. Like, you have, and you can combine this with other AVSs like oracles that might check your like NFT ownership. So if you have like bad kid, right, 100 points, right? If you have a sloth, like 10 points, if you have like, a public noun, right? Like, cause you can also make these things much more interchain, right? Like, I really do think that, there's a lot of network effects to be gained if you think beyond like chains, right? But yeah, so you have this policy, right? You might have an oracle that goes and like checks like certain things, like do they have this token? Do they have that token? What's their activity look like? That feeds into like fill out a form basically, which is then evaluated by an LLM, and then that returns a decision, yes or no, or maybe human review. We might always have that like third option where it's like, we weren't actually able to make a decision, or something was out of parameters. So we need actual humans to go in and vote on this. But, and then that decision results in an on-chain action that automatically gives them access to the DAO. No other actions needed. We're also working on like things like automated trading bots, right? Other types of like fun stuff, right? But I imagine a world where like, one time, the only time I ever had like a house, which I don't have anymore because I had to pay taxes. And 2022 was fucking rough. I tried to like renovate my bathroom, and I had to like talk with like, the government for this renovation, right? And this was a fucking insane process, right? I had to talk with my HOA, and then there had to be like this like form filled with the city, and like this inspector had to come in. It's like I'm fucking renovating like my shower, like god damn it, like this is not. And it like took like honestly, it felt like it took months, right? And it was just super slow, and the UX was really bad, right? All for like a guy to like come in at 8:30 in the morning, like like walk around, like take a look. All right, good, done. It's like it's such bullshit, right? And imagine a world where we could, sometimes it's good to have like those checks, right? Like you want to make sure people are not like, building, like there's been a bunch of tragedies, right? Like usually laws exist for a reason, right? Sometimes we forget the reason because the laws pile up, but usually like a bunch of people died, and so then they made a regulation for like fire safety or whatever, right? And maybe like, so what if instead we could just vote on a policy, and then just like have like, decentralized AIs like automatically enforce that policy, and then like flag for human review if needed, right? But you have a policy and AIs that are like 100% governable by the DAO, right? Not some other company, right? Where they control the system prompt, they pick which model you're using, they also steal all your data. But what if instead we could have just like agents that are like completely controlled by the DAO, where the DAO selects which model is being used, what the system prompt is, what like like who's allowed to interact with this thing, right? Like yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting, fun thing for people to play with. And we're also going to be launching some fun DAO games around this as well. So I hope you still have some Juno or stars, or maybe we'll figure out some other projects.
Mm-hmm. I think what Shriram said about like coordination, that's very true. But like humans have problems, and so like having like neutral robots that like, manage it all for you, especially like the unfun parts, is really interesting.
Totally. I just want to make sure those robots are actually neutral, right? And are not controlled by Sam Altman, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
I'm
that's
super pro the robots. Like I'm very, very pro AI. Like I'm definitely an accelerationist. But like, I also care about the politics of this. Like I don't want an AI world where like it's just owned by one company, right? And they just steal our data, right? Which is kind of the world we're heading to. I envision a different world. I think data DAOs are going to come back, actually. You know about data DAOs?
I don't know. Tell me.
Well, right now, when you use these like centralized services, like if you use Slack or whatever, you sign their terms of services, and they can like take your data and basically use it for whatever, right? So you're actually just like paying these companies to like give away your data, right? We've also reached a certain point in LLMs and like machine learning where they've scraped everything they can off the internet, right? Everything they can. And the models are getting better and better, but we've reached a certain plateau. And what we really need to get it to the next level is expert knowledge, well-curated data sets of labeled expert knowledge. So I think this is an opportunity for us to like maybe as experts like come together and form little like data collectives, right? You get a bunch of doctors, right? And they form a data union or a data DAO, or you could even think of it as a company. They're going to make money off this, right? And what they're going to do is they're not going to just be cucks and give away their data for free. No, they're going to like pool together, right? they are going to like have a DAO that's like going to like create some incentive system for them to contribute their data, right? And measure like the value of contributions and stuff. It's a deep topic, right? Maybe doctors is not a good topic because like I'm not a medical professional and I don't know shit about that. Um, but you have a group of experts that are going to come together and they're going to form a data DAO and they're going to make like a pool of their data, right? And they're going to contribute to this pool, right? And then they're going to be able to develop models of this pool, or they will license that pool to other people to develop models off that pool, right? And get paid for it, right? It's not really that hard. They're basically going to pool their data and use their collective bargaining power to make sure that like big companies like pay them and don't just like steal their data some other way, right? Um, I think this can
Yeah,
be
that
a
reminds
generalized
me.
concept. I mean, this is why things like decentralized social media really matter, is because, and why user-owned networks matter, because our data is actually valuable. It is the lifeblood of like this new agentic economy that we're building, right? Um, so I hope people wake up to that. But we probably need to make some nice, easy to use tools for this.
Yeah, I'm honestly still thinking about it. I think it really does tie into like the whole ownership, sovereignty, decentralization type stuff where you still you still want coordination of large systems, but you don't want to like give it to a central authority. And you also don't want to like do all that work, so you have like AIs do it for you. And I'm thinking like a nice council of like instead of like asshole Karen who runs the HOA, like having
Yeah,
like an AI do it who's not gonna like discriminate discriminate against you, who like has all the correct data, who can unbiasedly just govern this HOA.
yeah. As long as humans can govern that AI and control what its system prompt is, and like maybe some problem happens, and we're like, oh, we need to kind of change that thing about it, or we need to add this extra clause, or maybe this type of thing we want to do human review for, right? As long as humans govern, I think it's way better actually because you can actually make something that's going to do exactly what you say, right? You can kind of think of, I really kind of think of what we're doing with like AVSs or like these verifiable off-chain services is like we're kind of making like asynchronous like smart contracts, um, or we're kind of like allowing you to write. They're not smart contracts per se, right? But you can write a program that's like executed in a decentralized and verifiable way. Another big thing about WASM, because I know a lot of people are like, Risk 5 is super cool, super huge fan. Like, there's a lot of great stuff out there. But really, the other killer thing about WASM is it runs everywhere. It runs in your phone browser. And I think sadly, one of the things that why I still love CosmWasm, by the way, but I got a little bit disillusioned with like the lack of leadership. Um, you know, like I felt like people weren't doing very interesting things, um, and the great thing about Wasm is it runs everywhere, and that you can do way more with Wasm than just smart contracts, right? Wasm can run in your browser, for example, right? Um, if we want privacy, privacy with ZK proofs is very, very simple. Um, Look, a ZK proof itself doesn't give you privacy. If you send your data off to a prover service, right, you are sending your data to them. It is no longer private. They have it. They might try to shield it or whatever, but you are now trusting on them to like, shield it for you, right? Um, it's one of the issues I have with a lot of this like ZK stuff. Is it's focused on infrastructure and not on the fundamental issue of fucking privacy. Like, um, no, but there's still a lot of people doing really cool stuff with like privacy, like, um, you know, uh, but like the great thing about Wasm is Wasm runs in the browser, and so if you want privacy, generate your proofs in the browser. Like, don't ever like let the data like leave your laptop. Generate a proof locally, right? The world we're going to also with actively validated services is that you can actually have your own Wasm WASI runtime in a nice little UI. You don't even need to know you're doing this stuff, right? I mean, actually, Celestia had that really great example of their light clients, right? Here's a light client running in a browser. Like, perfect. This is exactly the kind of meta that we need to like be doubling down on as an industry. And really, I think the tagline is full stack decentralization, right? And we should settle for nothing less. And frankly, it's very disappointing to me how much like effort we go into making more and more abstract, like crazy, like infrastructure things of like data availability for like L3, like, whatever, like, um, and none of it actually matters because it doesn't give us fucking privacy and it doesn't give us full stack decentralization, right? Like we're still having like centralized websites, which are a huge point of like blocker and censorship. We're still having like centralized RPC networks. Like kudos to Celestia team for like shipping light clients and front ends because most wallets don't have light clients in them. You're just blindly trusting whatever RPC they're giving you, right? There's still like, while things are decentralized at some level, there's still these inevitable points of like, centralization. And it comes down to, I think, not thinking about or not really caring like as a market about full stack decentralization. And, I think the other thing that we have to just show people, they'll never really believe this themselves, but they're like, oh, it's better UX. I think you can actually get better UX with decentralized apps. I really can. One of the things that I was at the first decentralized web conference in 2016 in San Francisco. I think it was then. I don't know. The time frame always like blends together. I was talking with Juan Benet from Filecoin about IPFS, right? And like performance, right? Like and there was a really cool like stat and metric at the time because they ran some benchmarks of like IPFS versus other things, and IPFS has like potential to be faster than like getting a file from Cloudflare. Because if you have a file and it's on literally, let's say we're both on the same Wi-Fi, right? We're on the same network, and you have a file that I need, right? And you're running an IPFS node. It's actually quickest for me to get it from you on our network than to like go to some Cloudflare server, right? Like, and also, one of the things that we learned with like back in like the torrenting like P2P days is that like that stuff was actually like way better than like a lot of the like the centralized streaming platforms, right? Like you can actually build like really great UX with like decentralized technologies. You just have to be a little bit more clever, right? Because the patterns aren't like as baked out. But and why do we care about decentralization? I don't know. Actually, that's a question for you. Why do you care about decentralization?
I would say for more resilient systems is like the answer. Just less fragile systems. Honestly, if you can have a centralized system that you can like still make sure it runs perfectly, if you can still audit and verify yourself, then it really doesn't matter if it's centralized as long as like, the system is still overall resilient. Now some of these systems they have to be distributed no matter what. And sometimes they're like obviously better, clearly better is like the example with like storage systems where like CDNs already exist. It's just they're ran by like Amazon instead. They could just be ran by like normal people, consumer grade hardware.
The funny thing is these centralized cloud providers use decentralized technology to run their own shit. Like, because they have to like sync with data centers all over the world, right? Like, it's just like they make it so they run all the nodes. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Robustness is definitely an important thing, right? To me, I think I love this question because I think that it's an important question for us as an industry to answer, right? Because when you talk to normies don't give a fuck about decentralization, right? And so like I always think it's a challenge to like figure out how to explain the importance of it to other people. And to me, it comes down to the terms of service, right? If you're using a centralized thing, it's on somebody else's computers, right? It's their stuff. You're their bitch. You're going to sign their terms of service, right? And like, if it's decentralized, if it's open source, if you can run it yourself, then it's like your terms of service or a better terms of service, a more neutral terms of service, right? Everyone's getting the same deal. No one's getting like a special privilege to like take your data or whatever. Like, I think this is like maybe like the language we should start exploring a lot more, right? But maybe not. Who knows? I'm not a marketing expert, but I do think it's an interesting question as an industry we should start asking, right? Which is like, either we're going to make some really fucking awesome apps that people really love and want to use, right? And our track record so far has been not so great. I see way more infrastructure projects getting funding than apps, unfortunately. Like, yeah, so either we build cool apps or we convey to people why it's so important to use decentralized technologies. I think that the other, big reason we need these things is because we're going to need everything to be on blockchains. Everything. Because like when I see an image today, I don't know if an image is real. Like, and we're going to get that way with video as well. Like, I have a lot of AI artist friends, and, they've been playing around with all the like crazy different models and stuff. And like, we're in a hyper reality world, right? There's so many like made up what's true, right? Like, and so like the only really way we're gonna be able to figure this out is stuff that they did fucking back in 2014, 2015. There was this project called Media Chain. They actually got bought out by Spotify because it wasn't quite fully in like the decentralized era. But what Media Chain did was like, you take some content, the person who publishes the content like signs it and puts a hash of that on a chain. So simple, right? And now we're in an era where we just we need this everywhere, right? Like, how do I know that like you actually took a picture, right? And that it's like unaltered from like some original state, right? These are important questions that we're gonna have to ask, right? I never like I'm pretty old, like you might not remember this time, but like I remember the time when you saw a video of something and that was like definitive evidence. Like that was like, there was like, oh, it's on videotape, like he's guilty, like, and I think we're actually entering a world where we're just not going to know anymore unless stuff is like cryptographically signed.
Yeah. I think one of those, like the 2017 white paper era that had like these like big future problems and like had like these like, that era had problems and then was like, we can use this infrastructure for that, versus now it's like we have this infrastructure, we're like really dead set on like this like tiny little infra, and then like we like try to stuff applications inside of there. I think, didn't you start a like one of these social media decentralized applications a while ago?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was the original version of Stargaze. Like Stargaze was a decentralized social app, and we actually like had it like basically like fully built out, but didn't launch it, and pivoted to an NFT marketplace. So yeah, I've been but also even with that, like, right, like we need verifiable off-chain compute, right? We need a decentralized off-chain compute, right? I think we need to get more industry adoption of WebAssembly, because like, having people be able to run things and sign things like locally in their browser or on their computer is like the most decentralized you can get, and it most fully respects like people's autonomy and privacy. Yeah, we have a lot more work to do as an industry, but like I'm really fucking excited about the shit we're cooking up. Like it's like you can make some pretty insane things. Like I'm friends with so a lot of the people that have launched like these like AI meme coins. In fact, DAOs.fun, person who started that, used to work on DAODAO, and had a Cosmos project until they realized that no one would support them with their Cosmos project, so they pivoted to Solana and did a great job.
Shout out to Bao.
Yeah, that was awesome. You should get him on. Actually, you'd be like,
I actually was like, let's talk about Tailwind, and he was like, we just pivoted, and I'm like, oh shit, really? And he's like, yeah, and he said we just pivoted, lol, and I was like, let's talk about it, because there are problems with Cosmos where like the little guy who like does a lot of cool things doesn't really get that much attention, or there isn't that much attention in Cosmos is like the reality.
Yeah, there's not a lot of attention. There's not a lot of funding, unfortunately. unless you're like really part of like like certain special groups, right? Um, like like even DAODAO, we're used everywhere, and we like really struggle to get funding. That was another reason where I'm just like, fuck it. It's like time to like just like cook up some really cool shit. Um, and like, yeah, I don't know. I think that Cosmos still has like a future. Actually, I feel like Cosmos is the end state, right? The interchain is that's where we're going, right? That is the end state meta, right? Where there's just all these different blockchains, all these different state machines, and there's just interoperability between them, right? To me, I feel that is inevitable, right? Um, and there, like, there's this thing in like startups, right, where you can be like working on the right idea but too early. And I think Cosmos kind of has this problem where it's like it's kind of playing the end game before it's the end game. But,
Yeah.
I'm still involved. Like we're still doing Cosmos stuff. Like we are actually going to be, you know, the great thing about these the great thing about Waves is multi-chain. So we already support EVM and Cosmos. Solana coming soon, and probably some other stuff like Move eventually. Uh, because from my perspective, like, why limit myself to like one ecosystem, right? Like, we want services that can like it's actually much more valuable to write programs that can like query something on base and then like do something on another chain and then do something on like some other chain, like or just like relay packets, like one of the simple things that like you know like we did so much in Cosmos, but then there's like a lot of areas where we like just really didn't do like anything. Like IBC is great. I love that they left out incentives from IBC, right? But the fact that it's so many years later, right, and we still have like foundations funding relayers for IBC packets, like what the fuck? Like we couldn't innovate like a model of like more automated like relayers and like some incentives like model for this like by now. I know some people have done some work, but it's not like um, yeah. But like I'm just excited about the future, right? Like I want to just build like cool shit. We have some like insane like AI art projects that I think are gonna blow people's minds. Um, we've got like some amazing like DAO tooling happening. We're going to also be offering some of these services to EVM DAOs as well. So like probably like frameworks like MetaLex and uh, Aragon and Safe and things like that, right? You know, uh, yeah, I'm just really excited for the future. Like Waves is really cool. You can build like so much insane shit with this. Like, and I just want to like make some new novel experiences for people. I also want like dynamic NFTs to come back. Like, NFTs have just become so boring. Like, in fact, I remember when CryptoKitties came out. That was like 2017. CryptoKitties is way more interesting than like any NFT project you see today. It was done back in 2017, right? These are like NFTs that like evolve and you can like breed them together and stuff like that. But, eventually NFTs just became JPEGs and another speculative asset, right? Instead of this like more dynamic kind of like art form. But I think that's going to change, right? Because now we can have like NFTs with like agents, and we have NFTs that are like hooked up to oracles or that can control accounts and like all these other things. Like, I hope we see like a new era of NFTs, and we're making some really great technology that like um, lets you make new novel experiences for people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then the other thing that's coming. Um, is like our restaking protocol, which we call commitments. And the cool thing about commitments is you can do much more than just actively validated services. You can actually make governance commitments. So we're building this into DAODAO. You'll be able to like form alliances between various different DAOs and chains and services. You'll be able to like uh, use these like assets in DeFi protocols as well, which is another thing. I think when people I think everyone has written off restaking and like EigenLayer and all that stuff, right? And I think that they've actually like kind of missed the boat. That this is actually like a really fundamental new paradigm in crypto. And the reason they've written it off is because rewards aren't live yet and slashing isn't live yet. They've written it off before they've seen the thing like fully baked, right? Um, but like restaking is the first innovation in DeFi I've seen in years. And let me explain it to you like this. There's this concept in finance called a lien. Have you heard of liens before? This is a really simple and old primitive, right? And for some reason, during DeFi summer, we never built this primitive. Why? Well, I think it's because, like, we were probably focused on other things. And it's a weird primitive, right? It's a primitive that's almost like kind of associated with like the state or like the legal system, right? Like being able to have like rights to some property and then forcing someone to like give it over, right? And in crypto, maybe we're just kind of like antithetical to these kinds of ideas, but it's actually like based as fuck to be able to like do liens without the state. And the real unlock of restaking is that like you're getting everybody to like lock up their assets in like a shared protocol, right? Which gives them rewards. And then from there, they can opt into obligations, right? And these commitments are enforceable, right? So I can make a commitment like, if some event happens, like I will contribute 5% of my vault to like help insure against this risk, right? And then if that event happens, I've made that on-chain commitment. It's self-enforcing with smart contracts, and then I automatically give the money over. No having to like go and like, please send it to me, or no having to like, one of the times that the ironic thing about like DAO governance is like oftentimes when there's issues, people just like wind up going back to the nation state and then they sue each other, right? Oh, wow, we're so decentralized and autonomous here, right? Like, and so like liens are actually a really fundamental primitive, right? And there's a ton of crazy shit that you can build with them. And like, yeah, I think people are underestimating like how, and it's not, maybe it's because they see it too much as like Eigenlayer, right? And Eigenlayer is a great project. Like they've done a lot, right? And there's a lot of copycats. But like, I think people are missing the boat on restaking. They prejudged it. And this is actually a much more transformative thing that we're going to see like new types of DeFi protocols built on top of it, new types of governance protocols be built on top of it, and not to mention these verifiable off-chain services, which I think are going to be more and more important to actually just like making some goddamn great apps that people can use. Like, I don't know, DAODAO seems like it's been a little bit slow because we're just like cooking some like fucking insane shit in the background. And I'm really excited to like share that out to the world and, yeah.
I have a question about AVSs versus ZK. So AVSs, actively validated services, are like, you have this like ability to run a service, and if you prove that it's wrong, then you can slash it, correct? And doesn't ZK sort of like already do this, except there's no slashing and it's just purely verifying and like purely proof? Like you don't have to like do the whole, okay, now you did something bad, let me slash you. It's just like immediately proving.
I mean, ZK is great. I think that like, and look, you can have restaking, like you can have commitments without slashing, right? You totally can, right? And you might like, so we actually talk with a lot of people that are like trying to build like ZK proof marketplace kind of systems, right? And I think there usually is some conditions that people want to slash for: downtime and not running the correct software, right? If you generate you have a task to generate a proof, right? And you generate an invalid proof. Well, you're doing something wrong, right? Look, it's up to each protocol to decide, how they want to like architect these things. But I think of commitments and AVSs as these like they're just coordination systems, right? How do you trustlessly, without using like a centralized service, right? How do you trustlessly coordinate a bunch of different parties to like run the same piece of software under certain parameters, like with certain guarantees, right? And I think it's that simple. I think there's like other things that like ZK proofs are great, but oftentimes these infrastructure projects like also try to like claim they're the magic bullet for everything. uh, and then you see a bunch of partnerships and stuff. But like the thing I always look for is where are the apps, right? Where are the, like, you see all these projects that are raising all this money, but where are the apps, right? What new novel experiences have they unlocked for people? I'm super bullish on ZK. I think it's like the fundamental technology. I think we're going to see a lot more things kind of um, progressing in that direction, right? Um, like, I mean, if you look at the Ethereum roadmap or look at things like Celestia, look at things like, we're like, it's the future, but it's not everything, right? And ZK is great for some things, but it's also like terrible at others, at least right now, right? So if you want to do like machine learning stuff, right? ZK ML, it's in progress, right? I know some people that are working on it. It's not like good user experience yet, right? It's the compute overhead is like too much, right? Um, and so, there's also like the real time aspect as well, right? If you have a complicated ZK proof, like let's say you want to make decentralized Uber, you have the ride matching algorithm. Uh, that might be a complicated proof, right? I click the button and I want to get a fucking ride. I don't want to have to wait like, you know, 30 seconds for an H100 to like, make a proof of like all the different possible like route and ride combinations, right? Like, um, you know, and so like at some point we might get to a world where everything is ZK, but I want to ship real apps now and not just like an infrastructure company. Like, because if it's just like an infrastructure company called like Layer, I'm gonna be like so fucking pissed. Like that'd be so boring. Like we have to do more interesting things, right? But um, I have to go. I'd be happy to hop on in another 30 minutes, but I have a job interview I have to interview this candidate, and
Yeah. Anyways, I'll wrap it up right here.
cool,
Thank you so much. I'm excited for new apps, sort of something new.
cool.
So
And
when I heard about Oz, yeah,
I'll leave you with this. The secret project is not yet announced. Layer's just a front, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe you should still follow LayerOnEth to like, or maybe I don't know. DM me about the secret project, and I'll fill you in.